How's it going? Plan Up here. Just doing a little review on Tier Chains of Valhalla. First review that we're doing in this series. Soon to have some more games. This was a game key that was given to us to do the review, so be aware that this is a sponsored game review. And it was a pretty fun game. I'll tell you more about it. Let's get going. Into the meat of the review. First thing that hits you, of course, are the visuals of the introduction and the menu system. The visuals are done really well. I really enjoyed the anime style art. The character modeling is sharp in game as well as in the intros, and the movements feel really good when you're playing through the game. The introductions and the transitions in the game are okay. The storyline's pretty weak, but for a $10 game, it's not any more than you would expect. The menu system seems to operate just fine. The only thing missing, of course, is key bindings, but in a game where you primarily use a controller, key bindings aren't huge, but I still like to see them. Huge feature to the game is that you have to beat the entire game in 60 minutes or less. This timer will be counting down throughout the different stages. Another feature in the game is that you can actually level up your character. You can increase the amount of damage you do, increase the amount of life you have, or increase the amount of mobility you have or your dashes. For me, the only thing that made sense, that made an actual difference to the game, was leveling up the amount of life you had so you could take more hits, especially when you're trying to do your speed runs later on. Next thing you get dropped into, of course, is the tutorial. This tutorial guides you through all the basic movements in the game. So of course you use the analog stick or the D-pad to move. You can run left, right, jump, and crouch. There is no slide feature. Jumping is A, double jump is 2 A's, and you can actually do almost a triple jump by walking off edges and double jumping in this game. Shooting is as you would expect, horizontal, vertical, no diagonal, but functions well the way it is. Of course, this game is a platformer, so you will see a lot of platforms, mainly these kind of vertical, tunnel-y platforms that you see a lot, air vents and what have you, and gratuitous use of the wall slide technique. As you continue to increase your difficulty of your levels, you add more to your basic design of the platforming puzzles that you have to face, as you can see in this little montage. Generally, I'm not a huge fan of platformer style games because I feel like they put too much emphasis on the difficulty of the platforming features. This game, generally the platforming wasn't so difficult that it made me rage, but there were times that I did have to start over due to it. Next feature is your power changes that you have, which you use with the left shoulder button, and you go through a green, red, and blue weapon type. And as you can see, they show the weakness of each enemy in their life bar, which later makes it confusing fighting bosses, since they have no life bar. Y is your dodge. That does not give you any iframes in this game, but it does allow you to avoid some of the simpler platforming puzzles. Very useful in the different timing based puzzles that you face later on in the game, and also to get a lot of your secrets. So here's an example of my first playthrough of the very first level. I initially explored and found a secret up that wall and fought every enemy that I was faced with. On my second playthrough, as you can see, I learned that avoiding enemies was just as useful as fighting them. Also, your first playthroughs will often be longer due to you trying to find all the secrets, which once collected go away, so you don't need to get them again in subsequent playthroughs. And again, second playthrough of the same section, you can see the difference in where the focus is on speed and dodging enemies, more so than fighting everything you see. And next up on the agenda, of course, are the boss fights. The boss fights are pretty basic. Once you find a certain pattern that you can repeat in the boss fight, it's just a matter of repeating that same pattern over and over and over until they die. Hopefully you understand which weapon to use. Sometimes the scripting will prompt you into what weapon you should be using, but other bosses like this one and the final boss, they don't tell you what you should be using, and so for me, I never do if I was using the right weapon. The hardest level, of course, is the final level. As far as I know, it's the final level. I couldn't get any further than this because the ground in the level is instant death, as well as any of these Blu-rays. And so they definitely made the final level much more challenging than any other level in the game, although completely beatable. I didn't really have an issue until I got to the final boss, which you can see here is Fenrir, who ultimately wasn't overly challenging in his base form, except for not knowing what weapon to use, of course. But he gets much more challenging when he duplicates himself, and now you have two bosses to deal with, using different attacks at different times, and it just ended up being too much going on for me to figure out. So overall, what's the deal, right? I think it's a decent game. It's definitely built towards speedrunners. It's built with that speedrunning feel in it, which is just fine. Visually, it's very nice, and everything flows well. The music is very nice. The music gives a sense of urgency. It also has a bit of beef to it when you have those larger enemies and they're shooting at you. There's some good bass back in there, so it's got some good audio qualities to it. The playstyle itself doesn't lend itself to much replayability for me. I don't care about the leaderboards too much in this game. Maybe if I did, I'd want to replay it a lot more. Or if I was a speedrunner, I could see myself doing it a lot, put a lot more time into it. But with how it is now, I don't think I would put more than a couple playthroughs through it. So, several hours. Even doing the review, I put in over 4 hours. So that's something. Look at a $10.99 game and potentially 5 hours of game time for someone like me. That's a decent return on that kind of money. Not optimum for me, but I would like to see it in an $11 game. But not bad. You know, definitely up there with your per minute quality. So, do I recommend it to you? I'd say yes and no. If you like platformers, you like speedrunning stuff, you want to challenge yourself, yes. If you're a casual gamer or you want to play something with a little more depth, no. Probably not the game for you. Hopefully this helped you out, and look forward to more reviews from the channel. We'll see you next time.